Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on Facebook Live today. My name is Josh Boatwright. I'm with the Public Information Team here at Pinellas County Government. I'll be joined today by Mike Meidel, the Director of Pinellas County Economic Development. What we want to talk about today is you may have heard the news that our Board of County Commissioners this week approved a funding program called the Pinellas CARES Fund. And there's actually two parts of that fund. One part of that fund is to provide some individual assistance to folks who need help paying things like rent or utility bills. But another big part of it is small business grants. And we know there's a lot of interest in these small business grants. There's a lot of businesses that have been struggling during this pandemic. And these small business grants through Pinellas CARES will, the application for them will go online on Monday. And what the purpose of this Facebook Live is really to answer a lot of your questions about what these grants do, who they're for, what kind of impact they can have on your business, and whether you qualify for that assistance. The goal of these grants is really to help as many small businesses survive this time as possible and get to a place where they can thrive again. So I'm going to have Mike give a quick introduction about who he is and his department, and give you all an overview of the Pinellas CARES Small Business Grant Program. Then we'll go through a few of our top questions that we've gotten so far, and then we'll start to try to answer as many questions as you all have. And please feel free to ask questions within the Facebook comments. We have staff who are looking at those, and they'll send those our way so we can answer as many of those as possible today. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Mike Meidel. I'm the Economic Development Director for Pinellas County. And in good times, we're helping all of our small businesses to continue to grow and thrive, open new lines of business, open new locations. We also work with larger businesses in finding space for their corporate headquarters or manufacturing facilities. But right now, we've been charged with assisting the small businesses who've been affected by this COVID crisis, and in providing these $5,000 grants to each qualifying business. And our department staff and many others from Pinellas County government are joining in to help review these applications and get the checks out into the mail as quickly as we possibly can. The County Commission on Tuesday set aside $35 million out of the pot of money that we have received from the federal government. The feds have put money in the hands of every jurisdiction with 500,000 or more of population. And we are able to utilize these funds for this grant program. We've already verified that, and we're ready to roll. So the $5,000 grants go to those businesses that were most affected by the closures that were forced by the governor's order and by the Board of County Commissioners' orders. They are designed to really meet those immediate needs of those businesses and to help pay for employee payroll, for rent, for various vendor expenses, and really to help offset the revenue losses that you're experiencing now because of those closures. The funds can only be utilized for expenses associated with the COVID crisis, and they cannot be used to pay for items that are covered by your insurance or by other federal programs that you may have applied for. Now, you can have applied for the for the Paycheck Protection Program or the SBA loans, the forgivable loans, the disaster loans, and so on. And you could have received money for that, or may receive money in the future. It's just that you can't pay the same expense twice. If you have a rent check that you've paid already through PPP, then you would not be able to use these funds from the county to pay that same expense. However, when you have other expenses, they can be covered. The idea is the reason we chose $5,000 is to get a meaningful financial assistance into the hands of as many people as possible in the county as quickly as possible. So we have done an analysis of our business base, our economy here in Pinellas County, and we know there's about 6,500 businesses that could qualify under our existing criteria. And we know that at $5,000 a piece, we have enough money that everybody can get the check. So there is no rush to apply. The best thing to do is make sure that your application is accurate and complete. That will be the fastest way to get your check, not to be the first one who applies. So getting a complete application is far more important, and we will not run out of money. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the special conditions of the grant. Many of our local municipalities have already set up assistance programs for our small businesses. If you've already applied for that or already received money for that, or if you intend to apply in the future, in a future round of funding by the cities, that's fine. Again, we overlay on top of that. You don't have any problem with applying for every bit of assistance you can get, as long as you can justify the total amount of money that you've received is covered, both especially in the federal dollars. If you own more than one business, you can apply multiple times, once for each legal business entity. So if you've got separate tax books, you've got a separate business location, you're fine. You can apply multiple times. We always encourage people to apply for those other federal funding as they become available. And we have on our website at pced.org/COVID-19 loans, we have all the information on the current programs. And as they come in and out of operation, you'll see that on that site. So you can check there for the most recent information. Going on to eligibility criteria. So you know who qualifies. Businesses that occupy commercial space anywhere in Pinellas County. You don't have to be in the unincorporated area. You can be in any one of our 24 cities or in the unincorporated area, but you must own or rent commercial space. And what we'll be doing is checking the property appraiser's records and making sure that the business address you provide is not a residential address and it's not a homestead. So that's one of the key criteria. You have to have 25 full-time equivalent employees or less. This is designed to help our small business community first. And full-time equivalent employees you could have 50 half-time employees and still qualify. So what you do is add up all of the typical hours of all of your employees for 1 week's time and divide by 40. If that number is 25 or less, you're okay. And so it's the opportunity there to help many of our small businesses. You have to have been in business by October 1st of 2019. So, and then still be in business on February the 29th of 2020. So that's because we need to have documentation period. We need to know that you filed tax returns or some kind of document within that period for us to base our decisions upon. So those are the dates of operation right now. And you have to agree that you fully intend to return to operations after the crisis has passed. If you've decided to close your doors for good, you will not be eligible for the grant. The business types that are eligible, again, go back to the governor's order and the Board of County Commissioners orders. The Florida statutes for public food service enterprises, or public food service establishments, rather, are how we're identifying the restaurants. So there are specific chapters in Florida law, Chapter 500 and 509, that deal with that. But basically, restaurants will qualify, as will food trucks. So as long as you have a physical location or a food truck with a health certificate that authorizes you to do business from that truck, you would qualify as a restaurant. All of the bars, pubs, and nightclubs that were closed under the governor's order 20-68 will qualify. Short-term lodging and vacation rental management companies, as long as you're qualified and are paying the tourist development tax, which is for all short-term rentals less than 6 months or less, are required by law to collect that tax and remit it. If you've been doing that and it's a separate physical location from your home, it will qualify, again, as long as local ordinance allows it. So if you have a rental property that you're doing for vacation rentals, but the local zoning ordinance or some ordinance that your community does not allow it, it would not qualify. Otherwise, it would if you have a separate location. Any non-essential business listed under Section 5 of the Safer at Home ordinance that the Board of County Commissioners passed will qualify. And these are many of the firms that have had raised the biggest concern. Obviously, we chose these because they were forced to close, and we want to help compensate you for that. So this includes dog groomers, hair salons, car washes, those types of businesses that are providing personal services to the public, and many of our retail stores that were forced to close. And then finally, places of public and private assembly, things like bowling alleys and movie theaters that again were closed under the Safer at Home ordinance by the county are included in the eligibility. Finally, we're looking at some ineligible businesses. Again, as we talked about earlier, home-based businesses do not qualify. And this is because home-based businesses don't tend to have the high level of expenses that the other businesses do without having any rent or utilities on your separate business location, tend to not have employees or have very few employees compared to a brick and mortar store, and overall tend to have lower income than those with a physical location. So in this first round where we're giving $5,000 per business, we wanted to be sure that each of these businesses would conceivably have $5,000 worth of lost income and expenses during that period. Publicly traded companies don't qualify. We're not going to pay into a shareholder's pocket. It has to be a privately held local company. Nonprofit corporations do not qualify under this plan. We will be looking at other opportunities to help our nonprofits, but right now this is for-profit businesses only. The last two items are legal items. If you have an outstanding code enforcement lien on your property, you will not qualify. This does not mean that if you've been asked to pay for mowing your property because of a code violation, it means that you've purposely ignored code violations for a long period of time and have an actual lien placed on your property by the courts. And then finally, if any of the owners of the company or partners are actively serving a sentence for a felony conviction of a financial crime, you would not be eligible. Now that's a very narrow definition, so it has to be a financial crime and currently being served and a felony type offense. So with that, I think the next element that everybody is wondering about is the application process. And as was mentioned, we plan to go live with this on Monday. It will be an electronic digital portal that you'll be able to access from your home computer, your business computer, and even from your smartphone. There will be a mobile phone link to be able to complete that application entirely by smartphone. Now, we are working to identify local community partners for those businesses that have no electronic means of applying, and the local chambers of commerce, the cities are working on potentially opening up the libraries. The Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation and Prospera, Urban League, and others, we're approaching them about providing those opportunities for people to actually apply using their equipment if you don't have any opportunity to do that yourself. The documentation is just basically you have to prove that you are an ongoing business concern, and we have several documents, alternative documents you can do to prove that and that you were in business before October 1st. You have to prove that you have made money and spent money as a business, so tax returns of various kinds are acceptable for that proof. And then finally, you have to prove your employee count through your 941 forms, a W-3 of your employee summary, or the 1096 of your documented contract workers. So all of those would be acceptable documentation. We want to prove that, again, that you had recent income and expenses, and that can be a profit and loss statement coupled with a tax return. And then finally, you do need to digitally assign attest to the fact that all of the answers on your application are truthful and the documents are factual and correct and accurately reflect your business. And the entire process, if you have all your documentation handy and ready to go to upload it to the application, should only take about 15 minutes. So, but the key thing is, and we will have the information available on which documents we'll accept. You'll want to grab those tax forms first and check on your business registrations. But if you have all that ready, about 15 minutes is all it'll take. Once the application is submitted, we'll have, we've got a large staff here at Pinellas County that are reviewing those applications, or will be on Monday morning. And as long as everything's there that we ask for, the process shouldn't take very long on the approval side. We're brand new at this, and it's brand new software, so there's no guarantees, and we don't know what kind of volume we're going to get on Monday. But we know that within several weeks, we should have money in the hands of those who do qualify. We will have our finance department at the county and the Inspector General Department reviewing these items for fraud and for risk management purposes. So that's why it could take up to several weeks, depending on the volume and on the type of applications that are there. But we are committed to get the money out as quickly as possible. And again, we want to assure you that there is enough money that getting in early is not going to increase your chances of getting the money at all. So we appreciate your patience on this, and we really do want to get you the help you need as quickly as possible. Josh, that's what I have, and I'm ready to take any questions.
Great. Well, Mike, that's some great information. And in case you're just joining us on Facebook, we're talking with Mike Meidel, the Director of Pinellas County Economic Development. What we're discussing is the Pinellas CARES Small Business Grants. These are $5,000 grants for small businesses that have a commercial location in Pinellas County that were impacted by the pandemic and the closures that have occurred to try to protect public safety. Those grants will be available, or the application for the grants will be available starting Monday online. One thing I want to pick up on, Mike, that you mentioned is if you're wanting to get prepared to fill out that application, you can go on the website right now. You can go to pinellascounty.org/COVID-19 and hit the help button at the very top, how to get help. And you'll get information, all the information that Mike's been talking about, the various financial forms that you need to get prepared, all the qualifications, all of that is spelled out there. And we're also going to be developing a frequently asked questions document that will be reflected in some of the questions we're answering today, so that if you have other questions that come up, a lot of that will be available before you even apply on Monday. Mike, one thing we're getting a lot of questions about is just getting a little bit more clarity about the requirement to have a commercial location. So basically, if you have a commercial location, if you're paying rent on something other than your home, you likely would qualify for these funds, provided that you're a small business that's got between 1 and 25 employees or equivalent. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that versus some of the types of businesses that people, maybe you've heard some businesses that people aren't sure whether they qualify as a small commercial business that would be the right kind of business to get this grant?
Sure, and one of the biggest questions we've received consistently is the subject of hair salons. Many salons are operated such that the barber or hairstylist rents the chair within another person's facility. And as long as you are renting a chair in a salon, you would qualify. What we would need there is a professional license showing that you are a licensed stylist or barber with the state of Florida, and then show the rent check that you pay to your salon. The address hopefully on your certificate is the salon address. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but you'd have to justify why it isn't. Now, if you operate out of a spare room in your home, it would not qualify. So you have to be in a formal salon in a separate structure that is listed as a commercial structure in the property appraiser's database. Okay. Now, that same thing would apply to, say, if you're in a multi-tenant building. If you are renting an office in an office building, you may have the same address as 20 other people, but that's fine as long as you're renting your suite of offices or your own office. You would qualify.
That's helpful. Another big category, of course, is short-term rentals, Airbnb type rentals that you've talked about. And if I've heard you right, really the criteria is that could qualify if it's not your home that you're using for that vacation rental.
Yeah, that's correct. If you're renting a room or a floor of your home, that would not qualify. Now, if you have a separate investment structure that you own, that you're renting the entire separate standalone structure as that Airbnb property, that would qualify. So that's the big distinction. And it would only qualify if you're collecting and remitting the tourism development tax as required by law. And that you're legally operating within your community. So you have to, if you have a legal Airbnb within your community's zoning and ordinance requirements, and it's a separate structure, you would qualify.
So another question that's come in from quite a few people is about this grant fund versus maybe other types of assistance people have received. And obviously, we're encouraging people to apply for any assistance that they may qualify for on a state or federal level. But you mentioned, obviously, you can do that, but you can't use that money that you received from another funding source to pay for the same thing. Could you expound on that? So in other words, if you've already applied for some other federal program, what do you need to do as far as how you use that money versus the money you're applying for under the Pinellas CARES small business grant?
Well, probably the simplest answer is there is a question on the application form that basically says that, do you have $5,000 worth of expenses that are not covered by insurance and not covered by other federal programs? And as long as you can truthfully say yes to that, you would qualify. So that's the easiest way to explain it. And then same is true of any other program. As long as you can identify $5,000 that isn't covered from another grant program, you would qualify for this grant.
Okay. I think I got another question in about nonprofits, and I think you mentioned that they don't. That's one category that doesn't qualify for this particular grant.
Yeah, none of the 501c organizations of any kind would qualify for this grant as of right now. And the reasoning behind that, with 50C3s or charitable organizations that are primarily funded by philanthropy of the community, charitable giving, and by government contracts in many cases. And because of that, we are meeting next week with the county administrator and his staff to take a look specifically at those health and human services nonprofits that are key players in helping address the needs of the community now. We want to make sure they're adequately funded. So we will do that through other means. This is intended to be for-profit businesses here. Now, business associations like chambers of commerce or industry associations are membership organizations paid for by the dues of their members. They're not required to close down. They obviously will, some of their public events and fundraisers will be impacted. But most all of us have been impacted in some way or another, and we need to get the money out to as many people that were heavily impacted as possible. Now, we are using some of those organizations as our partners to get the word out and hopefully to maybe handle some of those paper applications or the people who don't have electronic means. So we will make efforts to compensate them for that assistance. So we're going to do everything we can to help our nonprofit community, but this particular program is designed for for-profits.
Another question that's come up, and you mentioned this a little bit, but maybe you can go into some more detail. What can you use this money for? What are the eligible types of expenses that this grant money can be used for?
Yeah, one of the reasons we chose the $5,000 and chose these larger small businesses to be able to do it is the impact that they have throughout the community. Because small businesses employ people, they buy services and products from others, they sell to others in the community, maybe even subcomponents that get incorporated into other things, and it helps by helping these businesses. We're spreading the money around the community in a lot of ways as they pay their bills. So you can spend the money to pay your employees, to pay their benefits, to pay your rent or mortgage, to pay the supplies that you need to operate or will need when you open up again, to pay your utility bill, your whatever vendors that you have that you owe money to. The idea being that just help you remain in business. So pretty much any legitimate business expense will be covered.
Okay. Got another question about a category. Folks who are sole proprietors, or they own and operate their own business. They do have a commercial space, but it's just them. They would qualify under this.
Yes, you don't. In fact, you may not consider yourself as an employee, but yeah, if you're a one-person business, you do qualify. And in fact, when you're calculating the hours, the total hours for your 25 employee FTE, you have to include yourself. So put in your own hours along there with all your employees, and as long as it comes below 1,000 a week, you're good. But some of the small businesses, vast majority of home-based businesses really are sole proprietors, or just contractors working for others on a 1099 basis. They do not qualify for this, but there are federal programs and state programs to help you. I think a lot of sole proprietors with home-based businesses are not aware that because they think that since they don't qualify for unemployment compensation in normal times, they don't qualify now. But there is a federal pandemic unemployment compensation assistance program that is specifically for those sole proprietors and contract workers that would not normally be covered. So please apply for unemployment, and in Florida it's called reemployment assistance, and you can do that through floridajobs.org, and go ahead and apply as if you were an unemployed worker, and you will qualify. Now they have a lag time there. They're still trying to work through the millions of people literally that have applied in the state of Florida, but be patient, and it does qualify under federal law.
Great. And for folks who may be just joining us, a lot of those resources beyond even just this Pinellas CARES small business grant can be found at your website, right, Mike?
Yes, pced.org. And that's Pinellas County Economic Development, the initials. So pced.org/COVID-19 loans. And it includes all the loans and grants programs, and everything will be right there in one place.
Great. Another question that's come in has to do with how you calculate that $5,000 of expenses. Is that that you've accumulated $5,000 of expenses that you're having a difficult time paying over the course of this pandemic, this particular month? How do you determine if you've accumulated the appropriate amount of expenses, or the eligible amount of expenses to qualify for this loan?
Yeah, very good question. The expenses have to have been occurred since March 1st. So any expenses since that date qualify for the federal funds.
Okay. Another question: if you're a business with multiple locations, how do you determine, are you only eligible for one of these $5,000 grants?
No, as if you have multiple locations, as long as they're set up as separate business entities. So you need a separate tax return, a separate 941 form, and so on to prove your employees. As long as they're set up as a separate LLC or some legal construct, you'll be able to qualify. And if so, the same individual could own a chain of restaurants or own multiple different types of businesses, and they would all qualify as long as you have those separate documentation that indicate they're a separate legal entity.
So obviously a big target as far as who we're trying to help are those businesses that had to close because they were deemed non-essential under the state order. But there are some businesses that weren't forced to close but had dramatic reduction in their business that would qualify. What's kind of the distinguishing line between those essential businesses that can qualify for this versus those that are not able to qualify for this funding?
Yeah, really, there are only two essential businesses that do qualify, business segments. One is the restaurants and food trucks, so the food service establishments under Florida statutes. And that is because, yes, they're allowed to be open, but as you all know, you can only do carry out or delivery. And many of these, restaurants with seating indoors would have 50 employees before, and they're down to 3 to 4 now. And so and their sales have slumped proportionally as well. So they're taking significant losses. And we want to try to be able to continue those businesses. They're a lot of the sense of place we have in the community. It's what makes Pinellas County special. And we want to be able to keep that going for these small independent restaurants are, critical to what makes our community a great place to be and what draws our tourists. So we want to make sure they can survive. The other one is the lodging establishments. And I know a lot of us have been impacted, but typically this time of year, the occupancy at our hotels and motels will be about 90%. Recently, it's been as low as 17%. That's an 80% reduction in income. And, a lot of us have lost a lot of money, but that's significant, and it's a key part of our economy. And again, we want to be able to keep those mom and pop hotels operating that are the flavor of our community.
Okay. One other business type we're getting a lot of questions on are contractors, plumbers, carpenters, folks who maybe they don't have a physical location, but they have a vehicle and they go from place to place doing work. Is that a category that qualifies for this or not?
It doesn't qualify, and not because they may be home-based, but because they are an essential service under the governor's order and are allowed to continue to operate. So that has been the situation with that particular class.
Okay. So I want to reiterate this because we have some people who are just joining us, and I think it's really important to emphasize the online application for this one-time $5,000 small business grant. It opens on Monday. It'll be available online on our website at pinellascounty.org/COVID-19. What's important, though, is I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about getting that application in quickly. There's a concern about there not being enough resource. But you mentioned at the beginning that we've identified a certain sets of businesses that have been really heavily impacted because we want to be able to serve as many of them as possible. Could you maybe reiterate for folks who maybe are concerned about whether there's enough resource, how they should approach the application and just the availability of this funding?
Sure. The county commission has set aside $35 million. So there's a lot of money there. And we did some research based on some of the data that we have available to us from public and private sources. And we believe about 6,500 businesses in Pinellas County will qualify under the guidelines that I presented today. And if we gave each of them $5,000, that'd be about $32.5 million. And so we've got a little bit of a buffer in case the data is old and not up to speed. But we have enough that you can be assured that if you qualify for the program, you will receive funding. And so we would encourage you again to be sure to just fill out the application completely, attach all documentation. That will get you your money fastest. If you just put in a weak application to try to get in there, first thing Monday morning, it's not going to help, because if it has to be escalated to another level of review because of the incompleteness of your application, it's going to slow you down, not speed you up. Your best bet is to just take your time, get all your documentation together and fill it out, and you'll be able to get your check faster that way.
And just to reiterate as well, for anybody who's just joining us, a lot of the application information, the types of documents you're going to need, the qualifications for the small business grants are available on the website right now. So definitely encourage you, even though the application won't go live until Monday, the next couple of days is a great time to go ahead and start collecting those documents to get your application ready. Because as Mike said, the more complete your application, if you have all of your documents in order, you'll get through the application more quickly. It'll get processed more quickly. On the process question, Mike, what happens after somebody submits their online application? Let's say on Monday you get in there, you've got all your documents in there, and you hit send. What happens next?
Well, we got a whole group of people ready to just take the next application on the electronic stack and go of what is supposed to be the right answer and what types of documents. They'll actually visually have a copy of a correct document that they can compare to. The documents we expect to find there are attached properly and you answer the questions as indicated in the application that you have to do, they should be able to approve that application. And then that will be sent into a queue of that every night we'll take together all of those reviewer approved applications, and we'll do some cross tabs to make sure that a business has not applied twice. The same business for the same business location hasn't applied twice, and then that will go on to the finance department and at the clerk of the court. And the Inspector General office will be involved as well. Now, they'll have to do their own due diligence, again, to assure that we're not duplicating payments in any way, and that all those legal requirements are filled. And that's really the part of the process that will take the longest, to do that due diligence. But once they're approved, they will cut a check and send it to the mailing address that you provide in the application. So it's critical that that mailing address is where you're going to be receiving the check, and that and every firm is required to complete a W-9 form that basically gives your business address and either your social security number or your business ID that you use in your tax returns. And that address data has to match the data on your application form. So as long as you do that, you'll receive the check at that address within a few weeks.
Okay. I've got a question that came in, which I think you've already addressed, but maybe you can clarify a little bit about whether a sole proprietor would qualify if if they don't own a commercial or rent a commercial space.
A sole proprietor would not qualify if they only have space in their home or operate out of their car. They have to have a separate physical address that we could verify as being a commercial address, so zoned commercially.
Okay. Another thing that people might be wondering, you mentioned early on that it's important that you show that your intention to remain in business going forward. That if you've already decided to close, this grant is really to help businesses continue to survive and thrive in our community. I imagine there's probably some businesses that aren't 100% sure right now. There's a lot of financial strain on them. Do we encourage you to go ahead and still apply if you're in kind of a tenuous spot as a business owner right now?
Yeah, definitely. The whole point of the grant is to help you survive, and then we do encourage you to go look at our pcd.org/COVID-19 loans, because there are other programs available that you may be able to piggyback upon our program. The local community programs are listed there too, and I know Clearwater intends to start a program, and Safety Harbor is considering it. So please be checking back there regularly as new federal programs become available. They'll be listed there. So by all means, don't treat this as your last chance. Go and apply for everything you can, and we'll help make those resources available to you.
Great. I know that your team and the county team, like you said, are behind the scenes getting ready to help process these grants. If folks start looking at the website and they have questions, I understand there's an email address we set up where folks can get some answers to maybe specific questions that we wouldn't be able to answer in a broad forum like this, but might be specific to their circumstances.
Sure, we can provide that. I would still encourage you to take a look at the county, pinellascounty.org/COVID-19 first, to see if those questions are already answered, because we expect a huge volume here, and we want to be able to address people's needs that are not covered in our standard website and so on. So if you read that site and you still don't have the answer to your question, please contact us at businesshelp@pinellascounty.org. And that email address will be checked by our staff, and we'll return to those emails as quickly as we can.
And actually on that point too, someone was asking if they need to follow up to make sure that they get all their documents in correctly, or if the county or our staff will be contacting them if there's something that's not quite right. Because I'm sure a lot of people, when they're collecting this information, might be uncertain. Did I give you everything you needed for a complete application?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. And the beauty of the software that we're using is that If you are ineligible, it's not likely that you'll get even an opportunity to submit the application. It will tell you that, before you even get going, the software will inform you that you're not qualified. So that's one way. If you manage to get to the point where you submit, you will be able to go into that software on a regular basis and check the status of your application. And at first it'll say it's been submitted. Secondly, it'll be assigned to a reviewer, review in process. And then it'll be several other steps that could be in there if you've been escalated or additional study because people had questions about one of your responses. There'll be a test, and then ultimately you'll see that the check has been issued. Also, you will get a notice of that your application has been accepted, and you'll get a letter ultimately if it is denied. You will get a letter describing the reason it was denied, and so you'll have that documentation as well.
And it's important to emphasize too. You only need to apply once. If you apply, there's ways you can check on the status of your application as you just outlined. But to make sure this process goes smoothly and we can get those checks out to folks as quickly as possible, it's important not to reapply over and over. Once you submit it, make sure that's the one and only time that you do that, right?
Yeah, if you do it more than once, it'll slow up the process because then the inspector general will catch it and say, whoop, we got two applications from the same company, and it'll take you longer, not faster. So please just apply one time for each legal entity.
And on that point, I know folks will wonder, and you mentioned at the very beginning about how long it will take between the time you submit the application, you get it. And I think what you emphasize is important. Obviously, this is a new program. We're rolling it out for the first time on Monday. We've received these funds from the federal government to really help people in need. We're going to be working on these applications as quickly as possible, but we're asking people to be patient because obviously we don't know what volume of applications we'll get. I wonder if you could say just a little bit more about what expectations folks should have once they hit the submit button on the application.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what to expect, honestly. We don't know how many we're going to get. We know that the city of St. Petersburg got 1,200 applications for their program in the first 3 weeks. But they had a more restrictive program, and obviously you had to be a business in St. Petersburg, so their universe of possible applicants is smaller. But they've so far done 253 checks in that 3-week period out of those 1,200 applications. So we hope to do better. We have a more simple program, and we have broader parameters for who does qualify. So we hope to do better than that, and but it could still take 2 to 3 weeks for you to get your check.
Yep, and we certainly are working behind the scenes, all of our staff to get that up and running and moving as quickly as possible. Yeah, but we do encourage patience, and I wanted to also emphasize something you said, Mike, about going to that website first, and we'll wrap up this chat in just a moment. But we want to make sure everybody listening knows where to get resources if you need to look up any information we're talking about today. We've mentioned a few times, but if you go to pinellascounty.org/COVID-19, there's a button at the top of the page that says Get Help. The first topic you're going to see on that website is these Pinellas CARES funds, and all of the information we talked about is there. There's going to be a frequently asked questions document that'll be up there in the next couple of days. We'll continue to add to that as we get more questions coming in from the community. So please continue to check on these online resources and try to get your questions answered that way. Obviously, there's help. You can get help if you need individualized help from county staff, but if you can find the answer there, that will save staff time in processing your application and many other folks' applications. Mike, is there any parting information you'd like to share with our viewers right now, particularly small business owners who are getting ready to look into whether they qualify for these grants?
I think we covered a lot of the basic questions about the Airbnbs and so on, and occupying space in another building. I think the important thing is you've got to prove that you're paying some kind of rent or mortgage. So have the documentation for that. And it's key. A lot of our home businesses don't even file the tax returns necessarily, particularly if they consider themselves more a hobby than a business. And so, but that's another reason why the home businesses were excluded. You've got to be able to have a Schedule C if you're a sole proprietor, or a 1120 if you're a corporation, and the appropriate, I think it's a 1096 if you're a partnership. So you have to have those tax documents that show your income and expenses, and you have those documents.
Yep.
For ideally, you've already, you only need that one, have not done so yet in 2019. You attach your 2018 return and then a profit and loss statement from your accountant or bookkeeper that shows that you still are in business now and have conducted business in the past year. So those two items are necessary.
Yeah, I had a little bit of interference there, but I did want to recap a lot of the information you were just talking about is on that website, as far as other ways you can document your financial records. If maybe you don't have some documents, if you have other documents that that still may be sufficient for you to qualify for the grant.
Yes, yeah, there's an extensive list of alternatives there as well. So you'll be able to identify, based on your type of business, what form you need to file.
Great. Well, Mike, we really appreciate you and appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Here in Pinellas County, we really love our small businesses, and we want to offer a helping hand. We know that a lot of businesses are in great need right now. So if your small business qualifies for these Pinellas CARES grants, please go online today, learn all about it, learn the qualifications you need, get ready to have a complete application on Monday. And once again, please be patient. This is an unprecedented time for everybody. Everybody is doing their best to get the help out that our community needs. And they will be working on these applications every day, trying to get as many of them approved as quickly as possible. But it's a new system, so look for that Monday. Go to our website, and we hope that today's broadcast has helped you get a little bit of a grasp on what these grants might be able to do to help your business and your family right now through this difficult time. Thank you all for joining us.
Mm-hmm.